All right, folks. Part 2, Perseus in the Greek Heroes by Percy Jackson. All right. We left off and Dictys was going to take Danae to visit his his brother, Polydictes. I could take you to see my brother, he said reluctantly. His name is Polydictes. He's the king of this island. Would he welcome us? Danae asked. Would he give us asylum? I'm sure he would. Dictys tried not to sound nervous, but his brother was a notorious ladies' man. He would probably welcome Danae a little too warmly. Danae frowned. If your brother is the king, why are you only a fisherman? No offense, fishermen are cool. I prefer not to spend too much time at the palace, Dictys said. Family issues. Danae knew all about family issues. She was uneasy about seeking help from King Polydictes, but she didn't see another option unless she wanted to stay on the beach and make a hut out of her box. Should I get cleaned up first? She asked Dictys. No, said the fisherman. With my brother, you should look as unattractive as possible. In fact, maybe rub some more sand on your face. Put some seaweed in your hair. Dictys led Danae and the baby to the main town on Seriphos. Looming above all the other buildings was the king's palace, a mass of white marble columns and sandstone walls with banners flying from the turrets, and a bunch of thuggish-looking guards at the gate. Danae started to wonder if living in a box on the beach wasn't such a bad idea, but she followed her fisherman friend into the throne room. King Polydictes sat on a bronze throne that must have offered little in the way of lower back support. Behind him, the walls were festooned with trophies, weapons, shields, banners, and a few stuffed heads of his enemies. You know, the usual decor to brighten up an audience chamber. Well, well, said Polydictes. What have you brought me, brother? It looks like you finally caught something worthwhile in your fishing nets. Dictys tried to think of an easy way to say, Please be nice to her and don't kill me. You are dismissed, the king said. The guards hustled the poor fisherman away. Polydictes leaned toward Danae. His grin didn't make him look any friendlier, since he had some nasty crooked teeth. He wasn't fooled by Danae's ragged clothes, or the sand on her face, the seaweed and the tiny sardines in her hair, or the bundle of rags she was holding. Why was she holding that bundle? Was it her carry-on bag? Polydictes could see how beautiful the girl was. Those eyes were gorgeous, that face, perfection. Give her a bath and some proper clothes, and she could pass for a princess. Don't be afraid, my dear, he said. How can I help you? Danae decided to play the victim, thinking the king would respond to that. She fell to her knees and wept. My lord, I am Danae, princess of Argos. My father, King Acrisius, cast me out. I beg for your protection. Polydictes' heart wasn't exactly moved, but his mental gears definitely started turning. Argos, nice city. He'd heard about Acrisius, the old king with no sons. Oh, this was too good. If Polydictes married Danae, he would become the ruler of both cities. He would finally have 2 throne rooms with enough wall space to display all those stuffed heads he kept in storage. Princess Danae, of course I grant you sanctuary, he said loud enough for all of his attendants to hear. I swear upon the gods you will be safe with me. He rose from his throne and descended the steps of his dais. He meant to take Danae in his arms to show what a kind, loving dude he was. As soon as he got within 5 feet of her, the princess's bundle of rags started screaming. Polydictes jumped back. The screaming stopped. What sorcery is this? Polydictes demanded. You have a bundle of screaming rags? It's a baby, my lord. Danae tried not to smirk at the king's horrified expression. This is my son, Perseus, whose father is Zeus. I hope your promise of protection extends to my poor, tiny child as well. Polydictes developed a tick in his right eye. He hated babies, wrinkly, pudgy creatures that cried and pooped. He was sorry he hadn't noticed the kid earlier, but he'd been distracted by Danae's beauty. He couldn't take back his promise now. All of his attendants had heard him say it. Besides, if the baby was a child of Zeus, that complicated matters. You couldn't chuck a demigod babies in the trash bin without angering the gods. Well, most of the time, anyway. Of course, the king managed. What a cute little thing. He will have my protection, too. Tell you what. The king edged closer, but Perseus started screaming again. The kid had an evil king radar. Ha ha, Polydictes said weakly. The boy has a strong set of lungs. He can be raised in the temple of Athena, far away at the other end of the city. Conveniently located in the best part of the city. The priests there will take excellent care of him. In the meantime, you and I, dear princess, can become better acquainted. Polydectes was used to getting his way. He figured it would take 15, maybe 16 minutes tops to get Danae to marry him. Instead, the next 17 years were the most frustrating time in Polydectes' life. Try as he might to become better acquainted with Danae, the princess and her son thwarted Polydectes at every turn. The king gave Danae her own suite of rooms at the palace. He gave her fancy clothes, beautiful jewelry, maidservants, and all-you-can-eat coupon book for the royal buffet. But Danae wasn't fooled. She knew she was just as much a prisoner here as she had been in the bronze cell. She wasn't allowed to leave the palace. Aside from her servants, the only visitors she would have were her son and his nursemaids from the temple of Athena. Danae loved those visits from Perseus. While he was a baby, he would scream every time the king got close to Danae. Since the king couldn't stand the sound, he would leave quickly and go take some aspirin. When Perseus wasn't around, Danae found other ways to rebuff the king's flirting. Whenever he came to her door, she would make retching noises and apologize for being sick. She would hide in the palace laundry room. She would weep uncontrollably, while her maidservants looked on until the king felt embarrassed and ran away. For years the king tried to win her affection. For years she resisted. Their mutual stubbornness was kind of impressive, actually. Once Perseus got older, things got easier for Danae and harder for Polydectes. After all, Perseus was a demigod. The dude had mad talent. By the time he was 7, he could wrestle a grown man to the floor. By the time he was 10, he could shoot an arrow across the length of the island and wield a sword better than any soldier in the king's army. Growing up in the temple of Athena, he learned about warfare and wisdom, how to pick your fights, how to honor the gods, all good stuff to know if you want to live through puberty. He was a good son, which meant he continued to visit his mom as often as possible. He didn't scream anymore, but when Polydectes came around, but if the king tried to flirt with Danae, Perseus would stand nearby, glaring, his arms crossed, and several deadly weapons hanging from his belt, until the king retreated. You think Polydectes would have given up, right? There were plenty of other women to bother. But you know how it is. Once you're told you can't have something, you want it even more. By the time Perseus turned 17, Polydectes was out of his mind with irritation. He wanted to marry Danae before she was too old to have more kids. He wanted to see his own children become kings of Argos and Seriphos, which added up to one thing. Perseus had to go. But how to get rid of a demigod without directly murdering him, especially since Perseus at 17 was the strongest and best fighter on the island? What Polydectes needed was a good trap, a way to make Perseus walk right into his own destruction without any of the blame splashing back onto Polydectes. Over the years, the king had seen a lot of heroes gallivanting around, slaying monsters, rescuing villagers and cute puppies, winning the hearts of princes and princesses, and getting major endorsement deals. Polydectes had no use for such nonsense, but he noticed that most of the heroes had a fatal flaw, some weakness that, with any luck, would get them killed. What was Perseus's fatal flaw? The boy was a prince of Argos, a son of Zeus, yet he had grown up as a castaway in a foreign kingdom with no money and only his mother for family. This made him a little touchy about his reputation. If he was anxious to prove himself, he would take on any challenge. If Polydectes could use that against him, the king began to smile. Oh, yes. He had just the challenge in mind. Later that week, Polydectes announced that he was collecting wedding presents for the princess of a neighboring island. Her name was Hippodamia. Her dad, King Oenomaus, was a friend of Polydectes, but none of that was really important. It was just an excuse to collect presents. Polydectes gathered all the rich and famous of Seriphos for a party at the palace to see what kind of loot they could cough up. Everybody wanted to impress the king, so they competed with one another to give the coolest presents. One family contributed a silver vase studded with rubies. Another gifted a golden chariot and a team of pure white horses. Another offered 1,000 drachma gift certificate for iTunes, nothing but the best for old what's-her-name, who was getting married to whoever. As the gifts piled up, Polydectes complimented everybody and made all the rich and famous people feel special, like they didn't already. Finally, he spotted Perseus over by the hors d'oeuvre table, hanging out with his mom and trying to go unnoticed. Perseus didn't want to be at this stupid party. Watching a bunch of snooty nobles suck up to the king wasn't his idea of fun. But he had a duty to look out for his mom in case Polydectes got flirty, so here he was, drinking lukewarm punch and eating meanie-weenies on toothpicks. "Well, Perseus," the king called across the room, "what have you brought as a present for my ally's daughter's wedding? You are the mightiest warrior in Seriphos. Everyone says so. Surely you have brought the most impressive gift." That was really low. Everybody knew Perseus was poor. The other guests snickered and turned up their noses, glad to see the young upstart put in his place. They didn't like it when handsome, strong, talented demigods from out of town topped them at anything. Perseus's face turned bright red. Next to him, Danae whispered, "Don't say anything, my son. He's just trying to make you angry. It's some sort of trap." Perseus wouldn't listen. He hated being made fun of. He was the son of Zeus. But the king and his nobles treated him like he was a worthless bum. He was tired of Polydectes and the way he kept Danae prisoner at the palace. Perseus stepped to the middle of the room. The nobles parted around him. He called to the king, "I may not be the richest one here, but I keep my promises. What would you like, Polydectes? Name any wedding gift for what's-her-name. Name it, and I will bring it." The crowd tittered nervously. Yes, I looked it up. Tittered, it really is a word. Polydectes just smiled. He'd been waiting for this. "A fine promise," said the king, "but promises are easy. Would you swear a binding oath, say, on the river Styx?" FYI, don't swear on the river Styx. It's the most serious oath you can make. If you don't keep your word, you're basically inviting Hades, his furies, and all the daemons of the underworld to drag you down to eternal punishment with no chance of parole. Perseus glanced at his mother. Danae shook her head. Perseus knew that making an oath to an evil guy like Polydectes was unwise. The priest who raised him at Athena's temple would not approve. Then Perseus looked around at the crowd, sneering and smirking at him. "I promise on the river Styx," he shouted. "What do you want, Polydectes?" The king reclined on his uncomfortable bronze throne. He gazed at the stuffed heads decorating his walls. "Bring me," cue the dramatic organ music, "the head of Medusa." Cue the gasping sound. Even saying the name Medusa was considered bad luck. Hunting her down and cutting off her head? That wasn't something you'd wish on your worst enemy. Medusa was the freakiest monster known to the Greeks. Once, she'd been a beautiful woman, but after she had a romantic get-together with Poseidon in Athena's temple, possibly the same temple where Perseus was raised, Athena had turned the poor girl into a hideous creature. You think your morning face is bad? Medusa was so ugly that one glance at her would turn you into stone. No one had ever seen her and lived, but according to rumors she had gold bat wings, brass talons for fingers, and hair made out of living poisonous snakes. She lived somewhere far to the east with her two sisters, who had also been transformed into bat-winged monsters, maybe because they dared to stay with their sister. Together, the three of them were known as the Gorgons, which sounds like an awesome name for a backup band. Now appearing, Johnny Gracious and the Gorgons. Okay, maybe not. Many heroes had ventured off to find Medusa and kill her because, well, I'm not sure why, actually. She wasn't bothering anyone as far as I know. Maybe just because it was a hard quest. Or maybe there was a prize for killing the ugliest monster. Whatever the case, no hero who went after her had ever returned. For a moment, the throne room was absolutely still. The crowd looked horrified. Danae looked horrified. Perseus was so horrified he couldn't feel his own toes. Polydectes smiled like Christmas had come early. "You did say name it and I'll bring it, correct? Well," the king spread his arms. "Bring it." The tension broke. The crowd howled with laughter. Looking at Perseus, a 17-year-old nobody, and imagining him cutting off the head of Medusa, it was just too ridiculous. Somebody yelled, "Bring me a Gorgon t-shirt while you're at it." "Bring me a snow cone," someone else shouted. Perseus fled in shame. His mom called after him, but he just kept running. On the throne, Polydectes basked in applause. He ordered party music and a round of lukewarm punch for everybody. He was in the mood to celebrate. At the very least, if Perseus chickened out, he'd be too embarrassed to ever come back. Maybe the gods would kill him for breaking his oath. And if the kid was actually stupid enough to find Medusa, well, Perseus would end up as a colossal demigod paperweight. The king's problems were over.